Welcome back, ladies and gents. Digital transformation is the expression that media executives are now embracing across the world. Technological advances have rapidly changed everything from how content is created to how it's delivered. So what does this mean for the future of news and information and for those who work in it? We'll explore that as we look at Media and Technology 2021 Trends.
Барлығын біз сессияда, яғни медиа және технологиялар 2021 жылдың трендтер сессиясында қарастырамыз.
And our moderator, based in France, is the business editor for Euronews. Please give a warm welcome to Sasha, Vakulina, and her panel.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you. It is great to be here. This is the day 3. I'm super excited about this session, and I think I've read tons of information trying to prep for it. Of course, the topic of our session on the media and technologies and the trends of 2021 is something that is very close to my news junkie heart, and I hope we're going to have a great conversation here with our speakers. And without further ado, it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce them to you. So here with us we have Andrew Kim. He's a writer, director, digital revolution expert in Silicon Valley in the US. Great having you here. Joining us online, we have Ben Hammersley, technologist, strategic forecasting consultant, USA Online. Hello.
Good morning.
With us here on stage, we have Timur Bekmambetov, producer, director, well, it's Russia and the US. Please welcome Alina Kim. She's a TikTok star, Yolo House from Kazakhstan. Alex Volcic, managing director of Kroll for Russia and this region. And Nikita Magutin, editor-in-chief and co-founder of the Buzzer publication, founder of the Mesh project in Russia. It's great to have you all here. Well, this year, of course, as you all know, as you've been following all the sessions in the event, the format is a hybrid one, which means we do have the audience here, we do have the speakers here and online, of course, Ben's here, but also we've got the great audience online, and we're going to be getting all the comments and questions from them as well. We're going to get that during the session towards the end of it. This will last around 90 minutes, and I'm very much encouraging all of you here on stage, here in the room with us, and everybody online to join in. Please do reach out. We're looking forward to getting your comments, your questions, and everything that you want to say or ask when it comes to the media and the trends for 2021. Well, actually, it's not just for 2021, right? It's also for all those years ahead. Because definitely what happened over the past year and the year and a half changed the rules of the game in almost every sense. We're talking media, we're talking news, we're talking social media, we're talking in general content. And according to the Reuters Institute survey, that's the recent one, over 70% of media industry executives say that the pandemic has accelerated their plans for digital transformation. But this trend is something that has started even before the pandemic, right? So this only accelerated expectedly so. Now, I want to start with a question on, before we go to the current trends and the future trends, let me do this. I want to ask all of you, all the speakers, and Andrew, let's start with you, please. Over this year and a half, when we have all been living through extraordinary times, what do you think are those biggest changes, apart from accelerating the digitalization of the media that you've seen and the changes that only were brought there because of the pandemic? What changed the most?
Oh, you can hear me, right? Yep. Well, I actually would take exception to the idea of these being exceptional times. I think they're fairly unexceptional. Yesterday I visited one of the Soviet gulags outside this city, and the 1930s or the late 1930s in the old Soviet Union. Those were exceptional times. I don't think COVID has changed very much. I think that we all have fairly short memory spans, and in a year or two this whole thing will be forgotten. I mean, obviously if you've died, I guess you're not going to know if you're dead, but if you lose someone, then that's bad, obviously. I'm not belittling that, but I would take exception to the idea of us living through exceptional times. We live in a time when everyone thinks they're perennially living through exceptional times. and they're usually wrong.
So you don't really think that what happened over the year and a half, what we all lived through when it comes to the media and content making, because ultimately, no matter whether we're talking traditional media, no matter we're talking social media, it's about the content making.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we all spend a lot of time online. I would say the biggest consequence of spending so much time online over the last 18 months is we've all been longing for the physical. I always predicted that the real value in 21st century media would be in the analog, in the physical, in events like this. Nobody really wants to spend time on Zoom. No one wants to. I mean, Ben, unfortunately, is in London. We'll ask him, but he's missing out. So if anything, I think what the pandemic has done is simply underlined and reiterated the value of the physical, the value of the analog, the idea in terms, say, for example, of people meeting one another, that nothing replicates looking them in the eye, nothing replicates being able to shake someone's hand. So whilst COVID, I guess, exaggerated and compounded and accelerated some of the disruptive natures of the digital revolution, I don't think it's changed anything. And as I said, because we live in this age of instant media where everything's exaggerated and then every single story gets so dramatized that we assume it's the first time in human history it's ever happened. We've had many plagues before, many worse plagues than COVID. It's not good, and it certainly has left an impact, but I just don't buy the idea that we're living in exceptional times.
Well, thank you. Ben, you are joining us online. Do you buy that idea? What's your take on that? Because with what you do, you've got to, you know, with your work for years, you've been looking at the future trends to come, and you're trying to forecast and foresee them. So what's your take on that? Do you buy that idea? Were you able to foresee this one?
Wish. In general, yes. Obviously, we've been talking about pandemics and the collapse of supply chains and all of those sorts of things for many years, but we've never had a date for it. And it's and whilst yes, I think Andrew's right in that we have lived through pandemics before as the human race. The we in that sentence is doing a lot of work. I mean, we haven't. You and I haven't. No one else listening to this hasn't before. The last pandemic was 100 years ago. So it's not unique in the realms of human history, but is unique in the realms of our own personal experiences, and that has to mean something. But I think I do agree that there is an overemphasis on how much change has happened in some respects. When we talk about digital transformation in the media, I think that we have to separate the transformation of the audience, the digital transformation of the way that we were receiving news or receiving media, which hasn't really changed very much over the past 2 years, and the digital transformation that has had to have happened within the media industry itself, within industries. The production of media, the production of news, the way that we actually do it, the fact that I'm connecting to you here from New York and we're doing everything over Zoom is something that was very rare 2 years ago and is now perfectly normal. But that's not about how people consume things so much as how people produce it. And that, I think, has changed something. One major change, though, that is not just because of COVID, but because of the years that preceded it as well, has been the emphasis that people have started to place on the content of the news and the content of their media. And specifically, I think if there is one thing that has changed, it has been the realization of many, many more people in the world that the news that their fellow citizens are consuming is just wrong. It's just misleading. It's misinformation. It's propaganda. It's conspiracy theories. It's just wrong. And because of the direct effects on people's health, that misinformation has been increasingly shown to be extraordinarily harmful in a way that, say, political misinformation was ignored or just discounted because people aren't as politically engaged as they are engaged with the task of not dying on a daily basis. And so our relationship with the truth, I think, has changed more than perhaps the way that we receive our news, which has been online for more than 20 years now. We seem to have been having the digitization of news conversation for most of my career.
Thanks for that. We're gonna touch upon the We're gonna touch upon the misinformation a little later. Yeah, go, Nikita.
Мне есть что добавить по этому вопросу.
I have something to add to this question because I disagree with the previous speakers. I believe that the mass media has actually taken a very convenient position, saying that we've been doing that for 20 years and nothing's changed. But I think a lot has changed. And I would mention that there are two parts of these changes. On the one side, we have the content consumers, and on the other hand, the content producers. And the regular people, just consumers of the content, our regular people, regular audience, have changed their consciousness tremendously. There is now a demand for new types of digital content. What are specifically these changes? Let me get to that. I would probably compare that to, glass and the water dripping into that glass drop by drop. And I think that it happened gradually. So there were drops going one after another. And then the pandemic, this, time X, when suddenly everyone was on lockdown at home in front of their computers, this was the last drop that overfilled this cup. And people now got a lot of time to monitor things. People now have a lot of interest to special projects. For instance, we have realized that special projects that we are doing in some interesting formats, if we are doing some new content, some augmented reality content, people started getting interested in that more and more. But basically, it's the same audience, but the time spent with these different formats has changed. That's the first thing. Second thing, the mass media doesn't want to change. They still think that they can feed people with the same types of news that they've been doing for the last 20 years. They keep thinking that we'll just get them the news. But I think it's a path towards destruction and losing popularity. I could mention a key change that I have noticed, maybe among the first ones. This trend continues for a while now, but during the pandemic, it became stronger. Regular people are tired of faceless brands. People no longer need brands that don't have a human face. People want to follow other people. Like the previous speaker mentioned, this need for physical contact. And this physical content, a person-to-person contact, actually was replaced by a contact with the person on the screen. Like we have a participant on the screen right now, and it is as if the person is with us. We don't need his body, we need his mind, and his mind is with us, and he is able to tell us his thoughts. So it's enough. And the biggest change that we came up with during the pandemic is that all of our largest publications, all of our investigations went to YouTube format, and we were able to present people on the screen. Myself and Anatoly, the authors in Baza edition, we started promoting our faces in the videos, and we noticed that those videos where we have real people, real faces and thoughts actually are more popular than faceless.
I tend to agree upon, as somebody who's been in the news industry for decades that surely the trend these days when it comes to the news media, specifically news, there is really demand for more personalization and for seeing more faces. But also, I do believe that there is big change when it comes to the idea of storytelling. Timur, what's your take on that? Because, of course, with your pioneering the screen live storytelling and technology formats, this is something that you're doing it in your area. And I think we're all somehow, adjusting and changing and doing the different storytelling these days.
Sorry, I will try in Russian. Да, я согласен.
Right, I agree actually with Nikita 100%. Lately, for the last, I think, 20 years, we've been living in two realities at the same time. We are living in the physical world, like our ancestors did for millennia, but we are also living in a digital world, more and more so. My phone now shows me that I spend about 8 hours a day on the social media, on the messengers, and it's quite obvious that the events in my digital life are becoming more and more important than what's happening in the physical world. I can state my love in the digital world. I can start conflicts and fights with people. I can save someone, or I can become the reason of the cause of the problem for other people. My actions in the digital world become even more important for myself and the outside world as well. And this trend is growing. Before the pandemic, well, I should say that at some point we've just came to a tipping point, and now it became obvious to everyone. But then the question is, who are we in the digital world? Are we the same people as we were in the past? Are you saying that Are you saying that we became more ready for the changes? Yes, we are ready for these changes, but we also need to think about what needs to happen to us so that we are not trying to, sit on both chairs. And we see that the digital world starts to change the physical world. And the problem that we have noticed when we started creating our movies in 2012, we started creating the movies where we are recording the screens of our characters, and that becomes the basis of the storytelling. And we started noticing that in the physical world, we are now lacking many important principles. In the digital world, we don't have this life and death concepts, because the person might die, but in digital world, their accounts will still continue. People don't think much about patriotism, about homeland, because it's a one global world. They don't have this concept of a family. Like even the mailbox, there will be one physical mailbox for the family, whereas the parents and the children will have completely different emails. Parents will know less about what their children are doing. They have troubles about raising their children, because whereas in the past, the children were playing in the yard and the parents were monitoring that, now they don't see what they're doing. And these changes are happening very quickly. The technologies are developing so quickly that we don't have enough time to humanize this environment that we are living in. It follows its own laws, and it's like this old world, lawless world. And historically speaking, we became a civilization because we agreed. All people at some point in the past agreed on some important things. And today we are witnessing this process when we are trying to formulate the rules on how to humanize this digital world. And the last thing I wanted to say, that's probably the main reason why I came here. I think that the only way to make a digital world more humane is to tell stories. Our physical world was mastered, and we sensed our physical world because we were telling fairy tales to our children, because there were religious books and texts, because we created narratives that touched us many people were moved and touched by certain texts, and then people accepted certain things as truth, and they made agreements, and after that came the laws, the regulation, the prisons, after people reached certain consensus. And right now, I think we are experiencing this process. We are trying to tell stories about the way we live in this digital world so that we can come up with some rules of the game and coexistence. But these changes are happening very quickly, so we need to accelerate that, right? I'm pretty sure that we can do that. I'm pretty sure that unless we tell enough stories in the next 3-5 years, if we cannot create a new Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet in the digital world, if we cannot come up with fairy tales for the digital world, then we will get a generation that was brought up in the lawless world with no values, and that will spill out to the physical world, and we don't know how they will behave and what's going to happen to them. Let's talk about this new generation.
Is fascinating and it's different. And here with us we have Alina Kim. She's a TikTok superstar. Alina, correct me if I'm mistaken, 28 million followers. 20 button. Well, I checked a few days ago, it was 28.
Уже 30 миллионов.
30 already. So see, that's progress. A couple of days ago it was 28, now 30. So as far as I understand, you became most popular in 2020. There was the biggest growth. How did it happen, and what's the situation now? Because I checked a couple of days ago, it was 27 million, 28 million, and now you're saying 30 million.
In 2020, I launched my own project. I called it Yolo House. And I apologize, I'm feeling a bit nervous. We all are. So I began to shoot. In 2020, I created Yolo House. This is a group of artistic people, my contemporaries. We live together, everyone having an individual room. We are co-thinkers. We have a common target. We shoot videos, and we are not driven to increase the number of our constituents. This is not our primal factor of motivation. Now tell us about, in regards to the importance to have a team of co-thinkers, because TikTok is a big thing. It's ahead of other social media, particularly in the last year. So we want to know. Of course, it's not a brand new phenomenon. This is 2021 now, and TikTok is at its most popular now. Yes, you are right. This is the trendiest platform. A lot of people are reswitching to TikTok. Recently, we have adult constituency on the TikTok. When you say adult, what age bandwidth are you talking about? My mom is there, actually. Well, that's self-explanatory. So, what, in your opinion, causes the expansion of that constituency? What do you think? Why do you think adults are joining TikTok in the last year and a half? What is the secret of popularity in TikTok? Why do people from other age categories, people with totally different interests, come joining TikTok? Well, this is something new. Can I help the lady, please? My opinion is because of the unique algorithm of promotion of your content on the TikTok that does not you allow to live feeling comfortable at the level you already have reached. It keeps kicking you in the back all the time. Every day you are supposed to shoot out and promote something. A very tricky algorithm. It motivates you to live every new day as a new one. Yes, it is a tricky algorithm, but tricky algorithms are in other social networks. So as a user, as a consuming entity, well, my opinion is the main TikTok factor of success is that it idealistically went along with the clip thinking of the modern generation. Clip thinking, mosaic thinking, when small inferior particles of bright emotions, abrupt and fast switching from event to another event. Pay attention to how TikTok operates. I might be mistaking in average per day a TikTok user, not the one who lives there, views approximately 70 video clips, and I do not think that any of existing platforms has this kind of frequency. Why? Because the duration of a video is 15 seconds only. So the process of making decision whether to watch the video or not takes a second and a half to the maximum. You switch it on, and this is it. When does your brain manage to understand whether it is interesting or not? So the mastery of people who operate in TikTok is not to only live in one house. It's not about teamwork, but is to draw people's attention in a matter of the first second, create proper impression in a matter of 1 second, and doing it on day-to-day basis, remaining topical in the eyes of your audience from second to second. And there's another nuance I wanted to talk about, a very illustrative situation confirming the words of Timur about duality of our present existence. We got life in the cyberspace, we got physical real life. Take a look at this lady, 30 million followers. She is a superstar. She is acting quite moderately and modestly. The anchor asked a question, do you consider yourself a celebrity? And her reaction was very modest, very reserved. That is cute, but at the same time, I didn't see on the TikTok, I saw something totally different. A person who operates openly in the cyberspace, and now this celebrity has been dragged out from her habitat, and she is not feeling comfortable in the real world, in the physical world. Alina, please.
It's a very interesting situation that I'm observing recently also about TikTok, is the fact that lots of classical, traditional, so to say, news medias are actually getting much bigger numbers on TikTok than they are on their linear broadcast. And we are talking about classical news, and we've seen some of the moves previously, a couple of years ago. It was before big TikTok popularity. Big news media organizations entered Snapchat with specific formats. Now, big traditional news organizations are going TikTok, and their numbers there are much better there. Alex.
I mean, I'm in awe that I'm sitting next to someone who has 30 million subscribers. And I think she's very krutaya, she's very cool. But there are real, I want to talk about the other side of the medal here, which I think this pandemic has only exacerbated, but there was a trend that was in place even before the pandemic, which is the rise of disinformation and fake news because of this new media. I have teenage kids. My daughter's 13. She wanted to have, and she's half American, it's not her fault. She wanted to have a conversation about Black Lives Matter on the basis of information she found on TikTok. And clearly, it was very difficult for me to explain that Black Lives Matter is an important subject, but let's read about it in more traditional forums and more traditional sources of information, and then we can talk about Black Lives Matter. And that was an interesting conversation because at the end, we talked about types of media and checking your sources rather than about TikTok. And so as a business, as a consulting business, we help clients with effects of disinformation a lot. So nowadays you can speak or write about anybody you want, and there's no editor checking your content. You can write, you can do a clip about me on TikTok saying horrible things. I mean, nobody would be interested in me, but as an example.
Well, you can say horrible things anywhere.
But in a...
Except when it comes to traditional TV or so.
As you know, I come from a very old journalistic family. My father is a very famous Italian news anchor. Before you could go on TV or write a piece about anybody, about anything, there would be 2 or 3 layers of pravierka, of scrutiny. As you know, you have an editor. I mean, you're super important, but somebody will check your work. And if things get contentious, then the legal department gets involved and says, oh, I'm not quite sure we can publish this.
It's a matter of responsibility afterwards as well.
Absolutely. And if you get it wrong, you either publish a correction or, I mean, there are consequences. These consequences are completely gone today, and so disinformation and so we are now in an era where disinformation and fake news can run free. And I think this pandemic has only made it worse. I agree with the first speaker who said that, you know, things haven't changed. It's not that fake news, disinformation is a new thing, but now we all spend so much time on new media that it's become exacerbated.
For sure, but also when it comes to misinformation and fake news, this, of course, the situation sort of got worse during the pandemic, but it's not because it's only on social media or new platforms like TikTok, for example, the absence of responsibility compared to traditional media. I do, of course, understand that when you work in the classical news organization, you do have editors, you do have fact-checking situation, you do have afterwards the legal and to carry on the responsibility. But then at the same time, to get nowadays, with the pandemic and even before the pandemic, the world had been changing so much at the same time. That's what I wanted. The world had been changing so much already before the pandemic that, to get the bigger and the fuller picture of every situation, you've got to check everything. You've got to go on all the sources. You're going to go traditional facts, fact-checking. Then you check all the social media. Then you go on TikTok. I go on TikTok preparing for my work.
Right, but you're talking about something that you do as a traditional journalist.
Well, yeah, it's just like I've got more things to do now, let's put it this way.
Right, I mean, you triangulate your information and you need to see everything that's out there.
Old school a bit, yeah.
Yeah?
I'm a bit old school. We do have a question from the audience. Please keep them coming. We're gonna go there in a second.
Yes.
Yeah? Please, Andrew.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Let me just observe one thing here. I think that one of the things that digital has done is turned numbers into theology. We're all obsessed with numbers. I mean, we always, of course, we all want to be big in one way or the other. But we're so obsessed with numbers that most of us don't critically look behind these numbers. So, for example, I'm not knowledgeable about what this young lady does on TikTok, so I want to premise what I'm going to say with that. But all you've said about her is this theology of numbers. You've said, oh, she has 28 million followers. Oh, she only had 27 yesterday and 26 the day before, and today she has 30 million. Who cares? To me, that's neither here nor there. Whether she has 3, 10 or 30 million followers, the interesting conversation, particularly in terms of media, is she generating revenue? How is she doing it? How is she sharing that revenue? And what's TikTok's role here? Are they like Facebook? Are they a core player in what Shoshana Zuboff correctly calls the age of surveillance capitalism? Is TikTok somehow enabling more and more surveillance of its users? So I would be curious as to this young lady. How does she make her money? What's she trying to do? And does she care about the numbers? Because the easy come, easy go. Half of all these social media stars, the same was true on YouTube for years. None of this conversation is new. These people rise and fall in meteoric terms. They're like fireworks. They go up in the sky, they explode, and 3 seconds later, they're instantly forgotten. So for me, the interesting question about TikTok and her as a performer, as a media player, is how she makes money, and secondly, how does she intend to genuinely build a long-term brand? Because anyone can become famous for this Warholian 3 or 5 seconds, but the really difficult thing is maintaining that fame.
Well, we're not going to be counting Alina's revenue for sure here, not on my watch.
But I'm curious.
No, I get it.
I don't want to know how much she's making, but I am interested. How's she making money? Is this a professional endeavor?
This is why I also said the dynamics of the followers increased, that changed so dramatically just over the past 3 to 4 days. And this is the fact that it get from A to B within 3 days for Alina's followers. This is when it comes to the revenues and so on. Timur.
Yes, I absolutely agree that the quantity and quality is two different values. And it's not only about money, because we're saying followers, which means following, and following where, and what's a, it's a big question. Большой вопрос, каков...
It's a big question. What is the sense behind those relationships between the author and his constituency, his audience or her audience? Quantity does matter, but the quality of relationships is far more important. Is it love? Is it interest? Is it curiosity? Or some other things that are relevant in those relationships. As to the pandemic itself and the growth of various fake news, false news, fake information, nobody knows. Maybe pandemic itself is the result of disinformation of the planet. Nikita, we have a question from the auditorium. Well, to the first speaker, I have a small observation. He asked a question, quite a rhetorical question. Why Alina? Am I being correct? Alina, what makes her a hero? What's so complicated about her work? So the speaker, how many subscribers and followers do you have? I think dramatically lower. She works with the big audience. She has her own constituency, multi-million constituency. You operate at the edge of relationships. Do you have this kind of experience? And judging from his speech, no, he doesn't. Now I want to talk about friendship on the TikTok. You wake up in the morning and you know how your day will be like. You go to bed, you know what's going to happen tomorrow. You will be shooting every goddamn day. You will have to generate fresh thoughts. You will be writing new scripts, agreeing about collaboration. This is your full-fledged conveyor activity. That generates another important moment. The old generation that in the principle does not see and does not recognize the value of the new technology, that generation sees no sense in TikTok. If to talk to my grandfather, Second World War veteran, if you ask him who a hero is, he would say that's a guy with a grenade against a tank. So for my grandfather, there are no heroes in the cyberspace, but here in cyberspace, we got a person who has 30 million followers. The person is exposing herself to communication with those people. That is tremendous, colossal work burden. If you do not realize that, it is pretty much possible that you root out from a totally different universe. You know, there is Marvel universe, and there is an old Soviet obsolete cartoon universe. You see, I just dislike the way you were discussing the lady, Mr. Keel. Now let's talk about some nuances what is the sense behind it and how it is physically happening. As a person who has interacted with the big masses of audiences, not as an author, but as a physical person, the thing is, you manage your audience unless you do not have a big constituency. You run the content you like. Eventually you become the hostage, the slave of your own audience, and you're imposed to do things they want you to. If you trial some other formats, they don't go with the preferences of your audience. They require from you the repetition of habitual actions. We want to love you the way we loved you yesterday. Please do the same. That is why the skill to develop when you have a great constituency, that is the core of the talent. And that talent is shown only by the younger generation. They're more gifted, they're more flexible. Take a look at TikTok accounts maintained by adults, by aging people. They're just copying and pasting. They're just trying to look teenage. They look silly and ridiculous. They show that they're thinking is no longer capable of conquering more audience. In this case, Alina, we extend cordial gratitude to you. Well, this is why I'm talking about this generation gap. Alina, can you tell us, please, when we talk about interaction in the cyberspace on TikTok with such an immense audience, colossal audience, what is the most complicated thing about it? This is not the audience in front of you now in this physical audience. This is online people. What is the most complicated thing about interacting with them? What makes it interesting, complicated? The thing is, I do not have a 30 million constituency. I am dying from curious. Most likely, the most complicated thing is to retain their attention, to keep them in my orbit. So when you talk about interaction, some people come, some people go. The things you are doing now, how popular are they? When you do something new, how popular is it with them? I interact with the audience directly in the straightforward way. I read their comments, their observations, but I don't always succeed to read all of the comments, not more than 50% of them. Do you respond to the comments? Rarely. Okay. Well, because there are too many comments probably on your TikTok page. It's physically impossible to answer all of them. Yes, it is. So let me draw you an example. You get a comment, you respond to a comment. How is it? Qui pro quo, or then you have a more breathing communication? You know, sometimes we have a very breathing discussions and communications. And what if, when you create a certain content at any platform, when the comments start incoming, when you have a new, fresh thought, likewise all of us, and suddenly you get a comment which is negative, I don't like it, I'm not comfortable, what do? Well, the thing is, I play with various formats. I shuffle the formats. Today one format, tomorrow is another format. If today a certain format is not that popular, I might switch over to something new one. But I think very soon I'm supposed to generate a new format. How soon? How soon? We are anticipating your forecasts. How soon? Year, 2 years. When do you anticipate that quantum break? 2, 3, 4 years. Well, in that case, we're going to have to relocate ourselves to TikTok.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? I've seen you smiling on some of our conversation here. Please bring it on.
Yeah.
I know that you're here. It's not like I didn't left you out of the conversation.
Thank you. I think the thing that I'm most surprised about this conversation is precisely how old everybody is sounding. The reason that TikTok is is good, the reason that Alina has 30 million followers or 31 million followers by now is because TikTok is really good. It's really entertaining, and 10 minutes, an hour spent on TikTok is never wasted. But it's not news. It's not Shakespeare. It's not Tolstoy.
But do we need to compare, Ben?
But that's my point, is that we don't have to compare them.
And we don't have to choose.
I think exactly, we don't have to choose. We can have both. And I think when we talk about media, we run the risk of just saying the young people are doing it wrong because the young people have this other thing that they're doing that we middle-aged people don't understand, and so therefore we're going to discount it. Whereas actually, I think in terms of media consumption and its effect on society, the biggest problem isn't young people watching TikTok, it's old people watching Fox News or the equivalent of of mainstream media. And yes, those mainstream media outlets have editors and they have fact checkers and they have all of that, but they do more damage socially and epistemologically as regards, facts or the lack of them than a million TikTok creators or YouTube creators or Twitter creators or Vine creators or Instagram or Snapchat or whichever the thing that young people are doing that the world blames for the reality, when actually the majority of fault, I think, in the media industry is made up of middle-aged and old people watching mainstream media and just being wrong compared to young people having fun on TikTok, which I think is something which is fantastic. I'm a big fan. So let's leave the young people out of it and discuss the real problem, which is, channels like Fox News just being massively misleading in an extraordinarily
well, that's what I wanted
way.
to say. Sometimes that's what we mentioned before, that sometimes you don't need to go on the new platforms or social media to be misleading or misinformating somebody. I mean, that happens across all the platforms. You don't really need,
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've seen over the past few years, not just with the pandemic, but with social change. I mean, Black Lives Matter has already been mentioned. That some of the best reporting, some of the best commentary, some of the best explainers of the wider problems have appeared on the new and more modern platforms. And some of the most misleading, some of the most just patently wrong viewpoints have appeared on the mainstream media. So let's not
But as a follow-up question,
confused between truth and age or tradition.
No, for sure. And that's, I definitely, we're going to get the question now. I definitely agree with you with the fact that we do not have to choose between the new social media or the traditional media. Nobody is obliged to make this sacred choice. It's about, I don't know, and it's also, I agree with you about, I definitely would not want to sound anyhow middle-aged or old-fashioned and old-schooled when it comes to the new media and new platforms. It's fascinating, it's interesting. You don't have to choose between classical and serious and non-serious. Same way as that I'm really applauding and really kind of kudos to all the traditional media who are trying and going into the new platforms, new formats and so on. We kind of quickly introduced, just quick mentioning at Euronews a few years ago, we introduced a totally social media newsroom. That's the team of people dedicated specifically to social media. They cover YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat. These are people who know how to find the information, how to turn it into news, how to make news out of it, but also with the full fact-checking process. This is great, and this is super popular in the sense of with the followers and with the new format and so on and so forth. Same goes with Timur for the storytelling. We have documentaries and stories and journalists now. It happens now during pandemic as well. All you need to do, all you need to cover the story or to follow the story in terms of storytelling is your phone. You don't need 3 or 4 cameras quite often anymore because it changes the format of the storytelling. And then the way it looks, you're totally taking the viewer and the follower with you into the story. Alex, very quickly, and I want to get the questions from the audience, because I can carry on, I think, for hours on that
Just
topic.
a quick follow-up to Ben's point about media as opposed to platforms. I think that distinction is gone. I think somebody's online reputation is a mix of these. So to say, oh, TikTok is fun, I may agree, I may not agree, but it's not media. I think that distinction is now gone. And somebody's online profile, online reputation is a mix. And then Sasha, when you do research on a subject, you will read both the Financial Times and TikTok to get the full picture.
Yeah, but I'm encouraging people who would only read the Financial Times to also go on TikTok. That's my encouragement there, because this is when you get the full picture, and nothing to do, I hope nothing to do with my age on that one, but it's really about getting the bigger and the fuller picture, because otherwise, if you don't do that, if you only stick to the Financial Times, I'm a big fan, the Wall Street Journal, go to the big media, you are limiting yourself, and you don't get the fuller picture, and that's your choice to stay there.
This is a very
there
important
is so much
point.
more out there. Okay, let's get the question from the audience. We do have a question there.
Добрый день, меня зовут Анастасия, я главный редактор информбюро КЗ. На самом деле очень вот последняя тема действительно интересная, очень хочется к вам присоединиться. Вопрос у меня такой. Я представитель традиционного медиа и всю жизнь работала в СМИ. Естественно, мы сейчас стараемся переформатироваться. Все медиа вышли в social-медиа, все пытаются как-то привлечь аудиторию. Но мне кажется, это какие-то полумеры. Как вы считаете, вот, допустим, молодое поколение, ну, как представитель у нас Алины сейчас...
Давайте мы все будем молодым поколением.
Ну, хорошо. Более юное поколение, нежели мы с вами, наверное, не интересуются настолько новостями и потребляют новости не оттуда, не из наших СМИ, которые мы делаем. То есть нет профессионалов. Интересно мне следующее. Мне интересно ваше мнение. Как вы считаете, какое будущее ждет профессиональные СМИ? Я имею в виду не развлечения, а именно новости.
Новостные.
Это будут информационные сайты, телевизионные новости и так далее. Вообще останутся они или мы все уйдем в social-медиа?
Классный вопрос, мне тоже очень интересно. Давайте обсудим, что будет с новостями. Алин, а вопрос прежде всего как бы был, наверное, к тебе, прости, я тебя перебиваю. Все-таки, как вот сказали про поколение, ты смотришь, вот когда, давай так, откуда ты потребляешь новости?
С интернета.
Где именно? Сайты или это платформы, или это Твиттер, или это еще что-то?
Сайты.
Сайты в основном. Вот ответ про поколение, если вот, да, он был. Например, сайты? К примеру, какой сайт?
Nur.kz.
Мы это не планировали. Вот, пожалуйста. Но в то же время, there was a great example about the situation on the Black Lives Matter from Alex earlier, and there is a lot you can consume on all kinds of platforms when it comes to Instagram, Twitter, and so on, and TikTok, on the reaction, on the phenomenon of the, for example, events like Black Lives Matter or others, because this reaction and the cultural context and everything that's happening there is also very much part of the story and of that news story. Nikita, давай вопрос.
And also to Nikita, speaking about the future of the news, can you share your idea? In terms of the future of the news, let's define the audience of TikTok and TikTok in particular. I read a great idea that in TikTok there is no demand for truth, for verification. People who come to TikTok, they are looking for some life hacks. How can you generate electricity with an orange? Or, how can you power a Tesla? Or how can you make something out of tin cans? There is a lot of that on TikTok. Plus, this content becomes viral. And what's most important is that people aren't treating it very critically. Something might be fake and they're okay with that. My feeling is that the younger generation, as we agreed to call them, I still insist that we're all young generation, okay? I'm still insist on being young. Well, okay, so a younger generation, or those people who are younger than we are, don't have this big need to get informed, to be on top of all the news all the time. And I'm looking at the audience of our Telegram channel. So a Telegram channel is probably the simplest way to receive news. I don't think there is an easier or quicker way than those chatbots. And when I look at our audience, we don't really have many people younger than 20. Our biggest audience is 23, 25 and older. So the core audience would be around 25 through 37, 40 maybe. So that's the biggest age group. And I think that us as journalists, as media people, we are living a life of self-delusion because we think that our work is very important from the standpoint of social values, humanitarian values. Of course, it is important, but from the standpoint of the interest of the younger audience, and I think that the attitude towards fakes on TikTok is a reflection of that. The younger audience doesn't really want it, this, mass information of the audience. Do you think that the reason for that is because we are presenting the information in the incorrect manner? Well, how can you present this information to a younger generation? I think with that we moved through a stage when we launched Mesh, we started thinking, how can we change the content so that people like consuming content on the social media, the same content that they're used to on the websites. And we said, okay, let's turn the news into stories. Let's tell them stories. Let's give them some emotion. Yeah, storytelling, indeed. But the media people don't really think of news as storytelling. They tell more about the jokes. I think that this is a good aspect. I agree that often the news people miss out on that. But indeed, the news and storytelling are the same thing. I just wanted to add here, I think I agree actually with what was said earlier. The question is that those people, who studied journalism in respected universities, and they were told to tell people about the physical world. For you, news is like criminal situation, economy, and so on. But there is not much information about the digital world, about us living in the digital world, about what is happening to people in this digital world. There is less information about that. And I think that is why the younger generation isn't really interested. They don't care who bought certain factory or which corrupt person was arrested. I fully agree with you in that sense, actually. And I cannot say that this is something that we missed. We were focusing on certain directions on purpose because we are speaking about ourselves. We don't want to get into the areas where we have the competitors that will always win compared to us, and we are not getting there. As I mentioned, they don't treat fakes with this level of criticality. Sometimes in the fight between the evil and the good, the evil wins because it's easier, it's simpler, it's more entertaining, whereas for the truth you have to fight and suffer. Okay, speaking about the news.
Вот я бы очень хотела, I'm gonna switch to English, Ben's also here. As a news person myself, I find it very interesting that quite often, and I know that probably I do it as well, and I try to stop myself not to do it, it's not only about the demand from the consumers and from the audience that, you know, oh, they're wrong, they don't want it. No, it's also about what you are ready to give. I really don't feel like I do believe that the storytelling and news are a match made in heaven. It's a fantastic combo, it works super well, but it's not only about what the audience don't want that, or our viewers or readers do not want that. It's about what you also want and how you also look at it's just my sort of 5 cents there in the conversation on news and storytelling. No concept storytellinga.
But the concept of storytelling can be developed in social media in all various platforms. Alina, question to you. So speaking about storytelling, when we talk about TikTok, yeah, okay, I think we're too focused on TikTok, right? You have a YouTube, you have Instagram, right? Those accounts are also very popular. So let's talk about those. So let's take all the social media, because of course you are a phenomenon and your point of view is very interesting for us. So you are saying that you read your news on the websites, like some conventional, let's say, websites, news sites. But if we now shift to storytelling in the social media format on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, other social media, where do you see the differences? And is it more interesting for you to follow that through stories on the social media? Let's take Black Lives Matter, for example. When something is happening, and if you can see how this story develops on YouTube, Instagram, is it more interesting? You know, storytelling sounds interesting, but when I go to the website, I'm able to read the headlines quickly, and I just know what is happening. All right. But just as any story, there is always a development, right? Even on the Instagram, on YouTube. YouTube is a great platform for different, like, long formats. I know that there is a big conflict between the Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, which is aimed at longer durations of the video. So what do you think about storytelling there, about presenting the information not as classical news, but when something is happening, some events or some problem happens, what would you say if that were to be broadcast in a more humane aspect? Is that more interesting? Yes, it is interesting. And you know, also, like on TikTok, there was a video which went viral on these bunnies being tested on like the cosmetics tests on animals, and they created a video of that, a short video that was very interesting to consume, and there was a lot of support. That is actually a good example, because that was a big piece of news, right, on animal testing, and there was a lot of debate on whether there should be animal testing. This debate has been going on for years, maybe decades already, but now, see, it is out there. This video became popular on TikTok, right? So I think that is an example. That actually contradicts to what Nikita said, that people are only interested in, you know, some positive things. See, the bunnies won. I will disagree. We don't know what, I haven't seen the video. We don't really know what happened in the video. Maybe the video was actually fake, and maybe that would actually confirm what I'm saying, that the most important thing for the younger generation is to be surprised by the content, is to be hooked from the first second. It's about the emotions of the content. The truth comes second, after all of that emotion. Well, yes, it will depend on the content, on what is happening there, right? Indeed, that's true, but it's about prompting some emotion. If you're watching the video and from the very first second you see that those bunnies used for animal testing, and maybe you have your own bunny at home as a pet and you feel emotional about it, so you have some emotions, and that is why a person is sharing this video. and it becomes viral. But what I'm saying is that those people won't really think about it. They won't verify the information on whether this is really happening to the bunnies. They're just consuming this content. So I think that the thought about fakes that I've mentioned before is actually quite deep, because there is a risk there. Maybe only journalists are interested in fake news. Maybe the younger generation isn't interested in this problem.
Can we talk a little bit about this? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Generational issue. I've been in this business. I realize now why, because I had these headphones on. Sounded weird. I've been in this business 30 years now, and I've been to so many conferences like this, where we've had these generational issues. Oh, the young people understand it more than the old. The young people grow up, and in 10 years we'll be having the same conversation with some new company with some new way of doing media. I think there's a couple of things to think seriously about in terms of media. The first is that the one thing that doesn't change is talent. And one of the things that media has done a very bad job at, as it's been disrupted, as traditional media has been replaced by new media, new companies, it's done a very bad job training professional talent people, whatever you want to call them, journalists, entertainers, storytellers. By the way, this fetish with story is also something I've been hearing for 30 years. It sounds very old-fashioned and stale. I don't even know what a story is. But we need to focus on how to nourish talent. One of my concerns with networks like TikTok is that the talent on it, and clearly there is remarkable talent, is not being curated properly, it's not being nourished. You need to think about economics. You need to think about how these people are being rewarded and how they're being managed and how their talent is being developed for them to have real careers. If these networks are just turning into speeded up assembly lines where everyone's famous for a few seconds and then people's attention move on to the next thing, we're never going to get the development of new generation of talent, which is what we need, whether they're storytellers or news tellers or writers or videographers or music artists. The real scarcity in today's digital environment is talent. The other thing to bear in mind is everyone cares about politics. People keep on talking about Black Lives Matter. No one's mentioned Occupy. Occupy was Black Lives Matter 10 years ago, and Occupy failed because it was also eaten up by the digital revolution. So what we need to figure out are digitally inspired political movements that last. Occupy didn't last. I fear that Black Lives Matter might not last. Me Too might not last. We need to figure out ways of developing political movement with legs that can survive more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you. We're going to get the questions from the audience. Yeah, please.
So when there was a discussion here about the secret of popularity of TikTok, I was actually in the media room, and you know, several journalists got the same idea at the same time. We actually joked about it, and we said maybe the secret is that the younger generation is more stupid and they're interested only in TikTok. Sorry about not being politically correct. So that was an idea in the audience. Maybe the younger generation wants to be stupid and they're interested in TikTok. And continuing on this topic, there was a lot of criticism here about people who read Financial Times or watch Fox News. There was some negativity toward them, but the same people are generating progress, are developing the economy, and are earning money for those people who can then shoot the videos and can spend hours of TikTok without doing anything productive. So my question is, what can we expect from TikTok generation that is only interested in entertainment? Even if we look at modern cinema, modern movies, people are looking for some popular superheroes, some unusual people. They don't want to see regular people. They want someone to solve their problem. So what can we expect with this TikTok generation who doesn't want to work, who just want to be entertained and for someone else to solve their problems? But at the same time, they're negative towards these people. Thank you for the question. I actually against using the word stupid because let's respect each other.
But again, the debate on the new generation and the old generation to saying that, oh, the old generation is working hard and the new generation is not working hard. No, they are working hard, like hell. They're just doing it differently. Ben, it's yours.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to continue that argument that we just heard because I'd have to use words that I think we both agree would be insulting.
Yeah, we agree on that, yeah.
But let's talk about something slightly tangential, which is this myth that in the olden days, people were incredibly engaged with complex news issues and that people would triple check their sources and would dig into stories and read multiple outlets so that they could find the truth about the universe. And that nowadays we don't do that because of some moral failing of the younger generation. And of course, this is a complete myth, right? The people who read more than one newspaper, the people who watch more than one news program are very few and far between. And reading serious news is a specialist hobby in the same way as listening to, say, classical music is these days a specialist hobby. And I think the question really is, why is that? Why is it that people aren't, in general, interested in serious news? And I think possibly one of the reasons for that is because for the vast majority of people, the vast majority of news really doesn't matter. It just doesn't affect you on a day-to-day basis. If you're trying to put food on your table, if you're trying to raise your children, if you're trying to just survive in the world, then what does it matter if
so it's a question
there's an
of
election
relevance
in South America? Yeah, it's just a question of relevancy.
And what about the idea of citizenship? What about the idea of citizenship is that, again, in democracies at least, we have to vote, and how we vote is in part at least determined with how we understand the world, and how we understand the world is at least partly determined by the consumption of media, whether it's TikTok or the FT.
Sure. Of course, one has one's duty as a citizen, but the amount of investment that I think the average person considers that worth on a daily basis when they get to vote every 4 or 5 years is very different to the amount of worth that they might attribute being entertained that day or something like that, right? Even in the pre-internet era, trashy magazines about celebrities were always more important on a day-to-day basis at a social level for social bonding reasons and just because they're generally more entertaining than the serious reporting in the Financial Times or the New York Times or something like that. We have to look at the place of different media in people's lives as they experience it. And for most people, being entertained and then getting on with their day is much more important than a deep understanding of contemporary politics or contemporary affairs. It's just not as important to most people as having a laugh or seeing a good dance on TikTok. It's just not, and that's disappointing, but that's just a wider structural issue and not a moral failing on their part that they're not reading, deep things. That's why comic books are more interesting than literature, because it fits into people's lives better.
Yeah, but then if we look at the matter of revenue as to judge on this popularity and the importance, I think it's not the new media like TikTok that are threatened by the FT or the Wall Street Journal, but the other way around, specifically over the past couple of years. We have more questions from the audience.
Можно вопрос? Можно мне дополнить?
I have a follow-up also. Okay, but let's listen to the question of the audience since we're limited. I'm Tofik Ablasov from Azerbaijan. You know, interesting, there was an interesting discussion here about fake news. And in a sense, I see our discussion here today as continuation of that discussion. We need to recognize that this top mountain of professional journalism that used to be in the past is now getting smaller. It's just a small hill, and somewhere in the middle we see those TikTokers. And then in this sense, professional journalists will fight till the end because there is still demand for professional journalism. But also, I think today it was quite symbolic, and I'm not trying to minimize the significance of the moderator, of the speakers, but I think it's quite symbolic that in the middle we have two heroes of the day, Mr. Bekmambetov and Alina here. They are the symbol of the modern times. Thank you. Thanks. Questions from the audience? Go ahead. Hi, everyone. My name is Ablayhan. I'm one of the producers of Yolo House, and as a colleague has mentioned, I'm this representative of the T generation. So today, I actually learned two things. So the first thread of discussion was, where is the younger generation leading everyone? I will give you a simple example. There is a football club, a soccer club, who was created by a blogger, and the whole team of players consists of bloggers. And what happens? Adidas in 2019 has published statistics on the number of T-shirts sold in this region, in the CIS. And the third place was taken by Manchester United, which cost $5 billion. Then the second place was taken by the Russian team, and the top place was this Amkout football club, meaning that those TikTok guys only shoot videos. It cost them 20,000 rubles. But now football becomes even more popular with their help. And now Adidas is actually investing into building some soccer fields for younger generation because of that popularity. And I think that that is an example of where we are going with the modern generation. Don't just see evils in the bloggers. Okay, let's start answering the question. What's the purpose of the mass media? Do you want to just come up with information or get the point across?
Alex, please.
I personally don't make news, but
Well, that was the question was to you and Andrew.
But I think the problem is not why media people do media. I mean, it's a job. It's a great job. It's a reputable profession. Somebody's got to do it. The problem is, where does the audience get the information from? So I'm going to switch your question around and say, where are people nowadays getting the info from? And they're getting it from media and from platforms and from YouTube. And I agree with you that actually, and I feel really old, I'm just 45, but I realize that that's completely ancient on this
Oh, but that's the thing, you shouldn't feel old. It's not about,
I'm over. But the point is, people like Alina and people like Nikita are much better at communicating. They're just better communicators than a lot of, those foreign correspondents that sit in Moscow and try to do, or here in Nur Sultan and try to do analysis and then don't communicate well. So you're not talking about old media, new media, or platforms. You're talking about the quality of communication, and you guys are just better. I mean, if you're one of the producers of Yolo House, congratulations. You're just a really good communicator.
Yeah, and I think that the one issue that hasn't been addressed here, again, is I've had lots of conversations like this about YouTube. And YouTube has a great deal of vitality. It's a sort of older generation version of TikTok. But no one ever addressed the power of YouTube. No one ever addressed their business model. No one ever addressed the remarkable, unaccountable power of these new platforms. Now, you could call them media, you can call them platforms, doesn't matter what you call them. But in this kind of conversation, I agree that the younger generation, and I don't like that term because, as I said, the generational discussion is endless and repetitive. But the real issue is who holds power. where the money is going, who determines which platforms are more powerful, and that isn't being addressed. I'm interested in TikTok, but I'm interested in how they're making money, who owns it, and where they're about to go. In the same way as YouTube's owned by Google, and it reflects the increasingly unaccountable nature of big tech. The one thing about newspapers is I agree with Ben, they're never ideal, and professional journalists were never ideal. They made stuff up, they were ideologues, they lied. But there was much more accountability, I think, with newspapers as there are with these new platforms. If we were having this conversation 30 years ago, we'd all be complaining about Rupert Murdoch's platform. No one's ever addressed TikTok. No one's even talked about who owns it, how they're making money, what their economic goals are. So it's really important to understand power. Power hasn't gone away. Money hasn't gone away. If anything, it's even more important in 2021 than it was in 1921.
And it will be getting only more and more important. Yeah, we have a question there.
Здравствуйте. Меня зовут Юлия.
Good day, I'm Yuliana, journalist from Uzbekistan, but you have optimistic view. For example, they are creating stories, but they have lost their historic time, their period. So what kind of generation will we have? Well, let us agree first about the terminology. I'm talking, when I say generation, I mean all of us, because we all are people of the same historic epoch, time period, and it doesn't matter where we come from and how old we are, we share problems, same problems. I honestly disagree with Nikita, although I fully understand his point of view. It appears to me that a good example is the US film industry, filmmaking industry. They are famous for happy ends. They are famous for producing mass feature films with humanistic message, which means America is looking for the new meanings. Americans want to know what is good and what is bad. They do not want to see blood, aggression, violence, battles, problems. They are looking, all of us, I am afraid, you show something terrorizing, people get scared. And the third one is sadness. You press on that button and people feel mercy and cry. So every storyteller has those three buttons and endless combinations. So he needs those three buttons to cause some links appearing in the brains of the audience. So I'm telling you a story about a greedy person who wanted to earn more and more money, and eventually the money collapsed on his head, he died, and we're laughing, and it failed. So we're all living in one big digital space. We're afraid of it because we don't understand it until the end. There are no rules and provisions in there that would be mature. So our mission.
Спасибо, ребят. Thank you so much.